Thank you very much. The next speaker is Beatrice de Gelder from Maastricht University and many other places. And the title of our talk is The Primate Social Brain. Is it all in the mind? Bea, please.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks for organizing this. Thanks for this great occasion to talk to you all, and first, more importantly, listen to you all. And I hope I don't ruin it too much with this little contribution. Never know. Of course. The white arrow. The white on the right. Yes. Okay. Start with some names and pictures of the people in the lab. This talk is a little bit what shall I say? A little bit not improvised, a little bit speculative. That's the word I was looking for. It's a little bit speculative, but it's based on some solid work done by the people here. The way I put their work together is entirely, I'm the one entirely to be blamed for them. I mean, I try to have them agree, but that's not always easy. Good. Social brain. My specific question here in this and in all the things the studies I'm working on, what in the brain is there in the brain selectivity for information coming from other people, and what is it? How can we get hold of it, and what does it consist of? Like we heard Uta and Chris talking about various things, eye gaze, etc., etc. My question is a little bit underneath that, the basement of that ability. Before you follow a gaze, you have to pick out the person whose gaze you follow. So, I mean, I'm actually at that level of. Currently, there are like. I characterize a little bit, but there are two theories about that. And you've seen it again in Uta and Chris' talk. Is our the social abilities, the social competences of primates, are they mental, or are they mental, first of all? Are they related to higher level mental aspects of social cognition? I mean, social cognition and social brain, those things are usually used interchangeably. And if they are cognitive, they do require complex mental cognitive inference processes. You could trace this back to Premack with his notion of theory of mind, which is an ability you can also attribute unproblematically to higher species. And these social mental competences build upon hierarchically lower processes. I mean, that's the standard picture. My question, of course, is how do they build upon them, or how do they build upon them, or are there two separate sets of skills? More recently, there have been some very recent papers in the literature that say, look, we don't need all those higher mental functions. Let's simply assume and start a research program that social vision and perception can successfully be modeled using visual algorithms. Social perception is actually very similar, if not identical, in terms of processes, of types of processes, to visual object recognition. There is no need for high-level cognitive models of mental state. There is no, I mean, all the machinery of mental state interference, so beloved of philosophers, I mean, we don't need all that, because the substantial part of the social competence is found in the fact that social primitives are embedded in the visual system. The social perception of other people, other perception is embedded in the visual system and can be deployed without any involvement of mental processes. And even the high-level aspects of social agents and social interactions are extracted by largely visual properties, by properties that you find in the visual system. For example, for individuals, you have postures, kinematics, eye gaze, you have body and face perception, and for multiples, you have dyads, direct perception of dyads, of facingness, of interpersonal distance, of personal distance, etc. So those are all seen, in this perspective, are all seen as embedded in the visual system. So I'm going to, there are some current answers to how this is done. We all know the notion of social affordances, namely the opportunities for action that the environment offers, the organism acts upon. Some people have said that it all happens through mirror neurons. It's actually the activity of mirror neurons that picks out elements of the environment that are social species, that are social entities. Some people just don't worry about all that, and there's many of them, and say, well, social is a natural category, other people is a natural category, it's a given, it's just what you start from. And not even addressing the question, how does the brain pick out what is social from a non-social entity? The risk, of course, is that many of those definitions risk to be circular, and we don't like circularity. So in this talk, I'm going to cover a bit too much, and apologies in advance. I will rush you through this, although I will talk at a lazy pace. No. First of all, I'm going to show you some work that is dedicated to finding subsystems that code at the network level a species-specific body model. So part one, I'm going to argue that in the brain, there is a species-specific body model. We'll see what it is. Then I'm going to talk about network connectivity by contrasting different functional conditions and talk a little bit about fear and defensive perception. Then, if time allows, I will relate what we know about this internal body model to awareness and to body perception and self. And then I will end by giving you some examples of where and how it happens in the brain, namely not at category, but at mid-level feature analysis. And I will tell you a little bit about what we currently view to be mid-level features. So first of all, our first goal was to define a large-scale network for species-specific perception in the brain. So we do this by defining a whole brain network for body perception and using exclusively data-driven methods in one experiment. And in a follow-up experiment, that was a bit too fast, guys. In the following experiment, we investigated the network nodes with human body specificity. So we have these kinds of stimuli, they are all short videos, and we have their scrambled counterparts making for 12 conditions in this 70 human fMRI study. Just for the sake of continuity with the literature, we looked at the results in univariate analysis, which we are normally not interested in, but you see that a bunch of two things to note, that even in univariate analysis with this stimulus set, we have not the traditional body areas from the literature, EBA and FBA, but we have a much broader set of, I'm not calling this is not a network, a much broader set of areas that are active when you contrast human versus monkey and bodies and objects and faces. Now, just to make it immediately clear, I mentioned you the data of this univariate analysis, and I said we were not interested in that. Why are we not interested in that? Because what we would have then, as you see my previous slide, where we had all these areas, the standard way of thinking about this is then putting arrows between those different areas. Okay? And that's not what we want to do, because we don't believe that way we are going to get the functionality of those different areas. To begin with, why are there different areas? You know the story of that miserable story of fMRI of the last 30 years. People find one area, they say that area does that. 10 years later, people find a second area, look at the face story, and then say, hey, so what would that do? But there is no clue. People have no clue. There have been fights about body area. Does EBA do body parts, and FBA does whole bodies? There's just no conclusive, no sensible story out in the literature about that. So for this and other reasons, we didn't want to go to. And I got this slide, as you see from Wim yesterday. We don't want to do that. We don't want to go this way, so we go another way. So what we do is we use independent component analysis for network extraction, and we model the time courses. I mean, all these, you believe all this is properly done. Actually, this paper is published, if that counts as a quality standard. Doesn't always, but it does in this case. Good. So what we do with this completely data-driven methods, we find in a very agnostic kind of way, we actually extracted 75 networks, out of which there were 2 that were really very different from all the others, and that were coding for human bodies. Then we did some further operations on that, and we found the ones that were specifically coding for the human body. So you have to believe that. Actually, you don't have to believe it, you can see it. What you see there in blue is the overall coverage of the network. Inside that network, we contrast different conditions, and then we see that in the D part of the figure, you see specificity for human body stimuli with nodes found in TPG, EBA, and premotor ventral cortex, inferior frontal gyrus. Okay, so strictly speaking, these are nodes shared in a network, and it's important to realize that we do not want to say of any of these areas that they are body areas. I mean, it's a little, you have to switch a little, make a mental switch when understanding this, because none of these areas code for bodies. It's the activity between those that are body coding specific. Okay? I don't have data on this. We did a very similar approach with scanning monkeys. So we scanned monkeys with the same stimulus set, and those data are not ready for presentation yet, but I can just tell you that you do the same approach with the monkey being scanned with that stimulus set. We find body specificity in monkeys. So there is a network in the monkey brain that codes specifically for the monkey brain as different from the human brain. Okay. And this, I'm just making a note here, this is obviously not exposure determined, because those monkeys see many more humans and many more humans in rewarding interactions than they see other monkeys. So there is the specific network activity of a network that codes for the species specificity. We did the same thing using EEG, and we find specifically all sorts of things, but the specific thing here is theta activity. We find, we find widespread bilateral activity, showing specific human body selectivity early on in a very long window, but starting early on post-stimulus, and specifically in the theta band. So that completely confirms, with an entirely different technology, completely confirms this notion that there is the species specificity in body representation, but also that it's found in the theta band, which has important connections, because actually the theta band is known reflects endogenous activity and is associated with with the seeing, the perceptions of defensive fear videos. So that, of course, brings me back to the next point. What do these networks do, and how do they do it? And can we go back to a second fMRI study to see how these body networks, can we sort of dig into these body networks and show them specific body expressions like aggression, defense behavior. Okay. So what we do in this second experiment, we use aggressive, defensive, neutral bodies, videos. They're always videos, I hope you noticed that, together with faces and objects, and we combine in this analysis the human body network analysis from the first experiment with a new experiment, also a 70 experiment on specific body conditions. We start from the lateral occipital network obtained in experiment 1. We use various procedures to find commonalities. First of all, to find commonalities for the different commonalities of the different body expressions in that network. And with what we find there is four subsystems that are very different from each other. I mean, we're no longer talking about EBA, obviously. We're talking about 4 subsystems consisting of non-overlapping clusters with a component weight that was significantly larger for one than for the 3 other, as you can see here in the first one there, lateral occipital inferior. You see the internal composition of each of these areas that was specified with the atlas from the Connectome project. So you see how these actually have a very, very different internal composition. Okay? So that's a level of detail and a level of specificity that is entirely new for this way of looking. So then, once you see this, you can say, hey, but what would possibly be the purpose of this, right? Then having these four guys here, having understood how different they are in their internal anatomical composition, we then go to function, and we try to see how the connectivity of each of them separately. You see the four colors. The four colors correspond to the four clusters we found. How their activity is modulated by different by action types, but all action types together. Okay? So we, so to speak, project the data from the action types into the data of the body model. Then we find those four clusters. They have very heterogeneous, each of them very heterogeneous anatomical composition. Then we try to find out what connectivity they may have with other areas of the brain. And you see that these four areas have very different connectivity with other areas. They all have connectivity with areas of the brain, but it's very different depending on the cluster you're actually looking at. Okay, so you see the lateral occipital inferior versus the two lateral posterior middle temporal gyrus ones. They connect very differently to different areas. No, I'm just checking. And then then having done this for the three different body areas, we can then regress out and get to the specific one, to each of the specific ones we are interested in. And here we find them, just giving the example of fear and defensive actions, we find that there is affective modulation for the different body conditions, and specifically for fear and affective, we find that when the brain is confronted with specific fear and defensive actions, the networks, the different networks specifically increase. We use them then, so I should have said we use the four different networks as seeds, and we look at the connectivity. And then for this condition, we find specifically enhanced connectivity with posterior cingulate precuneus and with caudate for the fear and defensive actions. So this is a step-by-step procedure that gets us to that. So this all happens inside this bottom-up defined bodywork, specialized, specified then for conditions, for substructures, for networks, etc., etc. So again, this does not mean to say that here posterior cingulate codes defensive actions. No, it means to say that the connectivity of the network to posterior cingulate increases for the site of defensive actions. Okay? Now, here comes a bit of, I wouldn't say speculation, but we were particularly interested in of course, in fear defensive activities and in how they instantiate activity in the brain. And this posterior cingulate precuneus happens to be found quite recently in a paper by Parvisi and collaborators. And because what they did was record from, but also directly stimulate. So they have causal evidence for the involvement of that area. And that area is, when they stimulate that area, patients lose, to put it very, very loosely, lose their sense of self. They get disoriented. A whole bunch of phenomena that are associated with I wouldn't say with agency, that's too much, but with the self aspect of experience. I'm not even saying the self aspect of awareness, but the self aspect of experience. So I thought that it was, this is a speculation part, I thought that it was very interesting to see how these body networks, how the activation and the connectivity of the body networks can be seen under circumstances when an image is shown that presents a direct threat to the person. And then we have this area, that we have this activity in precuneus coming in. Okay. And that also links, on the one hand, the species-specific body network found in fMRI and in EEG, as I showed you. The fact that when we go into the conditions, we find that activity for fear and defensive actions. And also we find, and that there may not be time about that, we did a series of studies investigating awareness of body images, perception of bodies under aware and non-aware conditions, but there won't be, well, can I still have, how many minutes? Couple of minutes, that's fine. So in an independent experiment, we wanted to find out how aware people are of body images, specifically of body images of threat. So we did this very complicated 70 CFS study, where people get lateral presentations of threatening and different body images, including threatening ones that you see on the slide here, and they have to respond. This is very little, but we use this awareness scale with four response alternatives. Are you aware of seeing anything? Nothing. A little bit. A bit more. To fully aware, so 4 stages, and our goal was to map to what extent these different reports on different types, stages, kinds of awareness would be reflected in brain activity. So here you see all the brain areas that are modulated by awareness levels. Again, of course, nobody believes anymore since long time that there is an area for awareness. But you see that all the ones you see here are modulated by the level of awareness. So that's from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. You also see, and that's why I want to show you, you see precuneus here, and that's the area we found of importance when when we combine findings about the body model in the brain with findings about the reaction to defensive images. Okay. So interestingly, among all these areas, I said there's a bunch of areas that are relevant for the awareness, non-awareness situation. However, there is a different pattern here. Some of them, as awareness increases, some of them go down in activity, others go up in activity. So in red, you see the ones that go down. In white, and then you see, so we see areas that go up, areas that go down, and more interestingly, or equally interestingly, some areas go down in a continuous way, and other areas go down in a dichotomous way. So the activity in some areas increases in a continuous fashion, or decreases in a continuous fashion, and for other areas, the activity decreases in a dichotomous fashion, depending on. So that's when that's a neuroscience paper coming out pretty soon. Good. I want to end with going back to my question: social? Is it vision, or is it mental? By giving as an example the kind of analysis we are currently doing that addresses that question by saying that the visual mental, that it's neither 100% visual nor 100% mental, but that it happens at an intermediate level. I mean, it sounds a bit lame to say that, but you'll see what I mean. So what we are doing currently is using body videos, naturalistic body videos. We code the movements. We code the movements using pose, deep lab combination, and then we try to find defined features over them. But these are, of course, not like an arm going up is not a feature in any serious sense of the word. We want the features to be generated by computational analysis of the video data, okay? Because otherwise we haven't gained anything. We are still in this kind of circular loop. Anyway, to give you an example, here, the feature that we had, that we found, that we can sort of computationally define in the videos is, for example, limb contraction, and there we see that limb contraction is coded. Limb contraction, of course, is a proxy for anger, for aggression, also for fear. That limb contraction is coded in different areas, and that I want to end. I want to end by giving that as an example that these features are not physical vision features. They're also not categories. So we are at this in-between level where we need to study what is just the specificity of the stimulus. Okay? So to summarize, we found partly overlapping networks coding the conspecific body image. When active, that network. When the networks are active, they realize, they implement the virtual and dynamic integration of the different networks. They function as an internal model sustaining perception of bodies and relating the percept to the perceiver when affective stimuli are present, and they modulate awareness. And these network functions or coding functions are mid-level visual features, and they occupy layers in between the physical variables and the conceptual categories. So I wouldn't go for the current fashionable view that body vision and face vision is like object vision, because we really miss something there. We miss something there that's played, I think, by the existence of a set of internal body networks that play a role here. Okay, that's it. Yes. And of course, what the feature is going to be is a purely empirical question, but they will, in all probability, be reckoned with biological constraints and ethological constraints on human behavior. Okay, thank you.